Hello, and welcome to Rethinking Our History, where we seek to shed a light on events that have been forgotten and covered up, and to make us all question how much do we really know about our history? I'm Felicia.
And I'm Ian, and we are here to reveal all the sordid details of history that have been swept under the rug. Get ready to get angry, be curious, and maybe have a laugh or two as we rethink our history.
Hello, friends.
Hey guys.
Thanks for joining us for another lesson. Number 19, back in the history. This one's going to suck. Sorry about that. We'll get to it. If you found us here first and are a fan of the paranormal, give our flagship show, The Paranormal Lovers, a listen. 100 episodes about everything from Betty and Barney Hill to a sit down with Cherokee historian John Tunai.
That was a great episode.
That was a good episode, and I got it right this time. I still
Nice.
want to call him Tooney.
Yeah.
But it's Tunai. We will be going to a convention on Lake Lanier, March 14th through the 16th. The link for Hautlanta will be in the show notes, and we hope to see some of you there. We're still working on them handmade tie-dye shirts.
Yeah, come get a tie-dye.
So come get a tie-dye. I think that's going to be like our convention thing.
We're hippies.
Tie-dye shirts for the conventions.
Mm-hmm.
You got to come to the convention to get a special handmade tie-dye Paranormal Lover shirt.
That's right.
If you would be so kind, please give us a follow and share on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok by searching for The Paranormal Lovers in the search bar. By searching for that name on YouTube, you can also subscribe to our channel and see videos.
Like, comment, subscribe.
If you would like to support the shows, we have a couple ways to do so. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/The Paranormal Lovers, where you get early access to unedited videos of both shows, as well as stickers.
Or just leave us a comment.
Yeah, that too. We also have a merch store over at theparanormallovers.threadless.com. And finally, if you have a personal story or a topic request, email us at theparanormallovers@yahoo.com. So I'm going to start this episode with a warning. We're going to be covering a really bad plane crash.
Oh boy.
And I know some people have a really extreme fear of flying.
Right after the plane crash just happened?
Listen, I covered this. I started the research before the plane crash happened.
That's weird, man. Okay.
What's even weirder about
psychic stuff going on.
Anyways, if you have a fear of flying, you don't want to listen to this episode. Cool. Fine. It's fine. What's weird is I was listening to an episode of Morbid. I think they just released it last week. Mm-hmm. Episode 638. 638.
Wow.
That's a lot of damn episodes.
We got some catching up to do.
Yeah. The crash of Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571, which is linked in the show notes, and it reminded me of another plane crash that they covered a few years ago. First, I do highly recommend giving 638 a listen. It is, again, like I said, linked in the show notes. The mental fortitude that those people had to have to survive for 69 days in the Andes Mountains.
Oh, man. I think I know what you're talking about crashed.
Now. Wow. It's a rough story. Rough. Yeah. Guys, go listen to it. It's good, though.
I bet.
Thankfully for the survivors of Eastern Airlines Flight 401, their plane crash was witnessed and help rushed to the scene immediately. But that does not make this event any less tragic. Shortly before midnight on December 29th, 1972, a Lockheed L-1011 TriStar crashed into the Florida Everglades. Out of over 170 humans on the plane, 101 lost their lives either in the crash or due to their injuries.
Jeez, that's a lot of people on a plane.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's a plane. It's like a big plane, like a
big plane.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of how many seats are on a plane. Yeah, there's at least like 100, I'd say, on the ones that like the Allegiant that we fly on.
Yeah, the normal size passenger planes now are like, they're like 3 rows or 3 seats and 2 seats on either side. And there's probably, 60 rows?
It's probably 30 at least. about 30 to 40 rows.
So let's see. 30 times 3. Yeah, it's 120 people.
Yeah, so it's a normal
About a
size
normal
plane.
size one then.
This was a regular flight from JFK and NYC to Miami International. It was like constant. It was like,
Yeah.
it's like Asheville to New York.
New York, it's like
The
so
Allegiant,
much traffic.
you know. This Lockheed L-1011 was a newer addition to the fleet, and this night it was flown by Captain Robert Alvin Bob Loft. Captain Bob was a 55-year-old veteran pilot who worked for Eastern Airlines for 32 years and had over 29,000 flight hours under his belt.
Wow.
Also working this flight was First Officer Albert John Burt Stockstill, 39, and Flight Engineer Donald Lewis Don Repo, 51.
Huh, that's funny.
Mhm.
The Kerbal that I'll play,
Yeah.
you take a pilot, an engineer, and a scientist.
Mhm. He was not also in the cockpit was off-duty technical officer Angelo Donadio, 47. He was not working on this flight, but was simply grabbing a ride back to Miami. He was like seated in the jump seat behind the pilot.
Yeah.
December 29th at 21:20 Eastern Standard or 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Flight 401 departed from NYC. All was well until 11:32 when Stockstill attempted to lower the landing gear as they approached Miami. When the landing gear is lowered, there is an indicator light that is supposed to light up when the gear is down. Stockstill noticed that their indicator light had not been activated.
Oh no.
He cycled the landing gear again, but again the light did not come on.
Landing gear got stuck.
Bit of a spoiler alert. The only thing wrong was actually the bulb.
Okay, so
The
I like to
landing
call
gear,
it the limit switch, but yeah.
the landing gear had deployed, but because they were so accustomed to the light, they didn't realize that the landing gear had deployed at the time. Captain Bob radioed the tower, asking to be put in a hold pattern while they fixed the landing gear. They were okayed to do so and told to climb to 2,000 feet or 610 meters and circle over the Everglades. While the pilots worked at disassembling the light, Repo was sent down to the avionics bay to visually check on the landing gear. 50 seconds after reaching 2,000 feet, Captain Bob had Officer Burt put the plane in autopilot. For 80 seconds, the plane flew level until it dropped 100 feet or 30 meters before leveling out for the next 2 minutes. Then the plane began a descent so gradual that the crew in the cockpit did not feel it.
Oh no.
It took 70 seconds and falling 250 feet or 76 meters before the seashore altitude warning chimed. But this warning was located under Don Repo's workstation. Don was not at his station, and I guess it wasn't a loud signal, which, like, I don't know, make it louder.
Yeah.
You got a signal that's like, hey, your altitude's dropping. You might want that thing to blare throughout the whole fucking plane, bro.
For sure.
Don was not at his station, and I guess it wasn't a loud signal because there was no indication on recordings that either pilot or co-pilot heard it.
Make it sound like the robot from Lost in Space. Warning! Warning!
I mean, something. It was not until Officer Burt was making another turn that anyone noticed the drop in altitude. This was taken from the flight recorder on board. Quote, "Stock still. We did something to the altitude. Loft. What? Stock still. We're still at 2,000 feet, right? Loft. Hey, what's happening here?" End quote. I just got goosebumps all over my body. That's rough.
To be a pilot, man.
10 seconds later, the plane crashed.
Wow.
It began with the left wing hitting the ground while the plane was going 227 miles per hour or 365 kilometers per hour.
Shit.
Followed by the engine and then the main undercarriage. The wreckage covered an area 1,600 feet or 5,000 meters long and 330 feet or 100 meters wide. It just so happened that this night was the same night that Robert Bud Marquise and Ray Dickinson were out frog gigging in the Everglades. I know. I was like,
imagine seeing that happen.
What is frog gigging?
Frog gigging.
They're just like stabbing frogs with sticks. That's all it is. And they eat them. So y'all don't be weird about it. And they witnessed the crash. Without thinking about their own personal safety, they took off towards the wreckage to help people. Bud spent 2 days out in the glades helping pull people from the crash, which resulted in him getting serious burns from the jet fuel in the water.
Mm.
67 of the 163 passengers initially survived the initial crash, as well as 8 out of 10 flight attendants. And these flight attendants, although battered and bruised, set about helping survivors. They patched up wounds as best they could, made sure no one struck matches in the jet fuel laced waters, because it was not until this incident that they decided to put flashlights on airplanes.
Right.
So they were in the dark and people were wanting to strike matches so they could see because they didn't have flashlights on the airplanes.
Yeah, and you can't do that around jet fuel.
I know flashlights were a damn thing in 1972. Why it took a wreck this bad just for
Mm-hmm.
somebody to go, hey, I don't know, maybe put a flashlight on it.
Right.
I don't know. And sang Christmas carols to try and keep spirits high because remember it was December 29th.
Yeah.
It was this last action, simply singing, that also helped rescuers pinpoint their location.
Mm.
Of the 4 men in the cockpit, it was Angelo Donato who would be the only survivor. First Officer Burt was killed on impact. Captain Bob died in the wreckage before rescuers got to him. And Repo, while he initially survived the crash, would die soon after at the hospital from his injuries.
Mm.
Frank Borman was Eastern's senior vice president of operations and a former astronaut. He was awoken in the middle of the night, drove to the office, and chartered a chopper out to the crash site, which, like, I don't know if I'm going to get on a chopper after one of our planes just crashed, but okay, whatever. As far as he was aware, there was no one coordinating rescue efforts, so that is what he did as soon as he got to the site. Those who initially survived the crash had to deal with various injuries and illnesses. While in the glades, the muddy water had impacted into many of their wounds. This helped in that it stopped most of the bleeding, but the danger came from the organisms that call the glades home. And we're not talking about alligators and snakes because, like, there's jet fuel in the water. They're probably going to bounce. They probably
Right.
bounced as soon as that damn plane started coming down.
I'm sure.
But these are little itty bitty organisms that are not meant to go into the body.
Malaria.
I'm thinking something worse than that. Malaria is typically from like mosquitoes.
More like parasites or something.
Yeah, parasites.
Mm-hmm.
8 of the survivors became infected, which led to a risk of gas gangrene. And I'm going to warn you, if you decide to go look up what gas gangrene is, you do so at your own risk.
Yeah, don't do that.
I saw one picture and was like, bleh.
Yeah.
Bleh. All the survivors, huh? Were you gonna say
I just
something?
said yeah.
Oh. All the survivors had some form of injury or wound. 60 of them were admitted to the hospital, many suffering from broken bones, and 14 had varying degrees of burns. When the NTSB concluded their investigation, they concluded that the autopilot had been bumped by the captain. To be a little bit more specific, the autopilot had been put into control wheel steering. So, like, it's in autopilot, but if you turn the yoke just a little bit, that control wheel steering will keep it in that particular trajectory.
Yeah.
It is believed that perhaps Captain Bob turned in his seat to talk to someone and just barely pressed down on his yoke. This put the plane in a slow descent, and since the CWS was activated, it held it in that position.
Damn.
At the same time, at the air control tower, flight controller Charles Johnson was dealing with another flight in trouble. National 307 did have landing gear failure, and Charles was having to use the only 3-dimensional radar in the tower to help them make an emergency landing. When the call came in from 401, Charles states that there was no emergency in their call. They weren't like, Mayday, Mayday, emergency, like, we're having issues. They were just like, hey, we need to be put in a hold pattern. We got to figure out this issue. The final report from the NTSB cited pilot error as the cause of the crash. Quote, the failure of the flight crew to monitor the flight instruments during the final 4 minutes of flight and to detect an unsuspected descent soon enough to prevent impact with the ground. Preoccupation with the malfunctioning of the nose landing gear position indicating system distracted the crew's attention from the instruments and allowed the descent to go unnoticed, end quote.
That's crazy.
Yeah. This accident, as well as others throughout the 1970s, pushed airlines to implement new training for the cockpit crew as well as new safety features in the cockpit. They added a harness to the jump seat and flashlights.
Nice.
Flashlights. So, as most of y'all who are on this show know, I started this show because of the history that leads to so much paranormal activity in the world. This event also has its fair share of alleged paranormal activity. For years following the accident, reports came in about people, employees, and passengers seeing the ghost of Captain Bob and engineer Don Repo. Allegedly, these reports came from people on other Lockheed L-1011s that allegedly had been made with salvaged parts from the wreckage of Flight 401. I'm going to say allegedly a lot because I don't want to get sued. Now, allegedly, the company refused to hear about it, and management allegedly threatened to fire anyone caught spreading ghost stories. Now, there are, of course, skeptics to these reports, some who claim to have talked to employees of Eastern Airlines, but that doesn't explain the CEO being quoted calling the ghost stories garbage or that they allegedly removed the parts from the plane. A floorboard from the plane is kept at the History of Miami in South Florida, and somehow Ed and Lorraine Warren got their hands on a piece of the wreckage as well. Theirs is kept at their occult museum in Monroe, Connecticut.
Connecticut.
In 1976, John G. Fuller published the book The Ghost of Flight 401. Fuller leans heavy on the paranormal aspects of the event. A show based on his book and by the same name was broadcast by NBC in February of 1978. The bigwigs considered suing him for libel, but decided not to, claiming they didn't want to give him the publicity. Captain Bob family had no such qualms and sued Fuller for, quote, infringement of law's right of publicity, for invasion of privacy, and for intentional infliction of emotional distress, end quote. However, their case was dismissed, and that dismissal was upheld by the Florida 4th District Court. While there are some arguments against the ghost of the crew being around, the alleged reports are easy enough to find online. Take this one captain. He was asked to check on an unresponsive passenger who was in a captain's uniform. The captain went to check and found the man dazed. He claims he recognized him as Captain Bob. Another time, a flight attendant claimed that she opened an overhead bin just to come face to face with Captain Bob's face. Another flight attendant claimed to have seen the face of Don Repo in an oven door. She called over a couple of people to witness what she was seeing. Then, allegedly, the face spoke and warned them to watch out for a fire on the plane. Allegedly, one of the engines failed on the return trip, Miami to New York, and had to be shut off to prevent it from catching fire.
Wow.
Another flight attendant saw an engineer working on the oven, but when she asked the flight engineer about it later, he claimed he had not done any work on the oven because it was fine. There is another report of Don sitting in the cockpit and warning the flight crew about faulty wiring, which they were able to fix before the flight. Once people saw Bob doing a pre-flight check on a plane set to fly and even told the ground crew it was all done. The pilot was so unnerved by this that he canceled the flight altogether.
I would too. Be like, nope.
What the hell you mean to tell me that Captain Bob did the check? Not. And the last report I'll cover has a pilot doing a pre-flight check in the cockpit when he heard knocking coming from under the floor. When he opened the trap door, he allegedly saw Don Repo's face looking back at him before it disappeared. The pilot decided to check things out and allegedly found an issue that would have caused a serious accident. Reports like these stopped over time, and although Eastern Airlines is in some ways still around, this version quit flying at midnight on January 19th, 1991. You want to know who was on that flight?
Who?
Your mother.
Really?
I asked her about it yesterday. I was like, hey, you remember this crash? She said, oh, yeah, I flew on their last flight out of Houston. I'm
all
like,
right.
I'm glad you're not dead.
I bet she'll like this episode. I'm gonna have to tell her to listen to it because my mom, she was a travel agent for like years.
Yeah, long
So
time.
she flew anybody and everybody who lived where we do, in and out of this place. So
Yeah. And she went on a lot of trips. They did a lot of like company trips and just like free trips because it's a travel agency.
yeah, I remember flying. We got some free airline tickets when she first started to, like, I don't know, tour an airplane or
Oh,
something.
that's cool.
They basically just like took off and landed at the same airport
Still cool though. You
just
just
to
get to like
kind of
ride
like,
around in an
yeah, just
airplane
to
for a minute.
see what it was like to ride
Fly.
in or fly in their their new airplane. And it was kind of cool. I was real young too, so
Yeah.
I was like, it was cool.
I was just like, well, thank God that you're fine because if you go to their wiki page, like if you look up Eastern Airlines at their Wikipedia page, their list of accidents and incidents is so long. Like it's their fatal accidents. I was like,
Yeah.
why is this so long?
Well, it's because like people underestimate how many planes are in the sky at one time.
It's if you
It's worse almost than
which is crazy
driving.
because you can download an app and
Yeah.
just look and see what planes are in the sky right now.
Yeah, if you guys are really interested, just download the app. Like there's probably a bunch of them,
Like just
but
go to the app store and just look up like flight tracker, plane tracker, or
yeah.
something like that. Like
And just look how many planes are above you at any point in time, and it is wild.
yeah, because as far as I know, my brother still works for Delta Airlines, and
Yeah.
he's got one of those flight trackers on his phones, and it is. Where
It's
were we at?
intense.
Raleigh.
Yeah.
Were we in Raleigh when he like clicked on it and showed us and the
Yeah.
number of planes? We were just like, wow, 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 wow.
And so like, and that's why like air traffic controllers, oh my god, that job is like the number one
So
stressful job
stressful.
in ever, like ever.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't imagine. This was, I think, what did
So you're having to keep up with like thousands of flights going back and forth and tracking all their paths and trying to direct them around each other.
this is the first time we've had an accident, an airplane accident in decades, and that doesn't include 9/11 hijackings and stuff like
Right.
the one that just happened the other day with that American Airlines plane and that Black Hawk that
Yep.
went down in the Potomac. Like, sure.
I feel for the air traffic controller people and saying they were like understaffed anyways.
It's like a
damn.
911 dispatchers. I don't know how they do it. They
Yeah.
get all the props in the world to me because you hear
I'm
some
sure
of the
that's
most
so stressful too.
horrific shit
Yeah.
on that phone. Horrific.
And there's nothing you can really do about it.
Nope. I don't have the mental bandwidth to do a job like that. I can barely dealing with the public for 15 hours a week.
It's the same thing with traffic controllers. Like,
Yep.
they could tell people what to do, but like they
you have to
can't.
trust that the pilot's going to listen to your instructions.
Yeah.
Yeah. In 2011, a group purchased the intellectual property, including trademarks, of Eastern Airlines. They formed the Eastern Airlines Group. They began chartered flights in 2014, and in 2020, they landed their first commercial flight at JFK. And I really do hope them all the success in the world. I hope that they can change the legacy that the former Eastern Airlines had one into one of safety and savings. Savings would be nice. Don't charge us $143 for a goddamn carry-on, okay?
Just because you can.
Allegiant.
Right.
Huh. I want to take your plane to go somewhere this year, but I don't want to pay $143 for a carry-on.
Yep. It's outrageous.
It is absolutely. It's robbery, man.
Mm-hmm.
I also hope all of those reports of ghosts were real. It seems like they all had a good motive for being there, other than like popping up in the overhead bin. I think Captain Bob just wanted to fuck with that flight attendant. He's like, "Hey, bitch," and she's like, "Ah." If they are real, they saved many lives, and I think they should be recognized for that.
For sure. For sure.
This is another one of those things that I am really glad is heavily regulated nowadays, because I've heard many stories of plane crashes now, and if I didn't know that things had gotten better, I would never get on a plane.
Yeah.
Because I heard the Uruguay flight crash. I've heard this one. I've heard the Julianne flight crash. I'm just like, I'm so glad y'all got it better. So, what do you think of the crash of Flight 401, Bill?
It's interesting for sure.
Human error.
Yeah. He stuck it on cruise control and then bumped it.
Bumped the cruise control. And I can't, I mean, 29, he had 29,000 hours of flying time.
Yep.
That is insane.
Just
Like,
shows you how important the pilots are.
I need to know what that is. How do you like divvy that up into a year? Hang on. This goes to show you how important training is for pilots.
Mm-hmm. It's a dangerous thing. I think the only other thing that kills more people per year is like cars, probably.
So he had roughly 3 years of flying experience under his belt, like a solid 3 years. Because
Wow.
there's 876 hours in a year.
Right.
And yeah, so I don't know. It's just a shame. Like,
Yeah.
just like, I'm really glad that we have pilots like Sully Sullenberger now. Because, yeah, Sully landed it in the Hudson, and this guy.
I mean, when you have a really dangerous job like that, then you don't want to become complacent.
You can't. You really can't.
You'll get hurt or die.
We know this just from you working at the place that you work at. Like,
I know I had a really rough week this week, and I know
you want to show
you
people
don't want
your
to get
finger.
complacent.
He got a little complacent and he got his finger whacked. So,
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope we didn't give you guys any fear of flying again, because that one's rough. All right. We will see you guys next week.
See you guys.
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.